Welcome to the Monday Monologue. Well, you can see I finally got my KT120 monoblock set up all finished. I got my color preamp that was designed to match with these amps, and it gives it just that little bit of gain that the 6EJ7 tubes needed to really rock and roll from a normal source. With my phono preamp, it was actually enough, but like with a DAC, it was kind of struggling to have enough output gain to drive these amps. And this color preamp does it in spades. And being able to adjust the input gain versus the output gain, and how much harmonic distortion these 12AU7 tubes kind of add to the signal feeding these, because these are super clean output amps, it really kind of took the edge off of the top end that they had, and they just sound amazing now. And I'm so happy with the way these turned out. Now, the only thing I'm not crazy about is drilling these holes where I did accidentally, where I was going to put the power switch here and then decided I didn't like the way that looked, so I put a couple of these little screens here and moved the power switch back here. I really like the power switch back here, but I think it's going to look better with just one screen on the opposite side of the power transformer and not these. And so probably going to sell this one off as a blimp, give somebody maybe $100 off for the first one I built that didn't come out quite perfect, but it still functions awesome and comes with tubes and everything. So it'd be like $900 for this one. And it does have a little booger boo-boo in the front here. It's got a little small dent there, which I guess I could round the edge off and get rid of it and sand it, but I think these have already got a clear finish on it, and then you'd be trying to blend the finish, then you're sanding it all. It's just like, I'm just going to sell it like it is. So anyway, this turned out great, and I'm kind of curious what you guys think something like this would retail for. You know, a preamp with a couple of matching KT120 mono blocks that have these. I mean, some people would say these aren't high-end iron, but like, you can't buy ISO Tango iron in this impedance rating that'll work with these tubes. And so that's not even an option. And so these Thermionic Lab ones, these things aren't cheap. They're 8-core irons, about half of what they are. So not cheap iron. These are Hammond Power and Choke. Things work awesome. Got a really heavy-duty chassis. All the hardware and everything on them is super nice. Y'all have seen the inside of them. They're beautiful on the inside. All high quality, super high voltage capacitors, and you know, all that stuff. And so, yeah, they would come with pre-tested tubes. They're early production, hand-picked, that I know will bias up and give you a spare set of tubes for the future. Got new old stock 5AR4 tubes. Got these mesh plate RCA tubes in the front. Clear top RCA new old stock, and new old stock RCA rectifier tube. So, yeah, really, really nice setup. I'm curious what you guys think it's worth. I know what I think I would have to sell it for to make it worth, you know, building another set, because I would probably want another one for myself. They sound that good, but somebody offered me the right price, I would sell this. So, hey, I'm in business now, right? I'm supposed to be selling stuff. So anyway, color preamps are going to get those out soon. I've got the parts here to do them. I did a little bit of change on this one. I didn't really like this knob, so I went with this one. But now I'm going to be waiting for these knobs. So the first ones may come with these larger knobs, which some people said they like the looks of anyway. I personally like this one it's the same diameter there. It's actually almost a little bigger where you grab it, but it doesn't have this little fluted thing on the bottom. And I don't know, and this is a little taller, and it just, I don't know. To me, it looks out of place, but maybe other people would think it looks fine. You could leave in the comments about that too, which one of these you think looks better. But I put them both on the shaft, and I think that one kind of matches the amp and matches this stuff better. So the other thing that I was going to go over today is a revisit about what we talked last week on the importance of sources. And really interesting thing happened, and see if this makes sense to you, because me and a customer were at first kind of baffled by this. I came out last week to their house, and they had these Tecton speakers. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'll link up here the name of the model that they were, but they were the ones that have, like, it's got a 12-inch woofer, and then it's got like a ring of 6 kind of mid-range drivers with a tweeter in the middle of it. And I'd never seen them before, but we hooked up his system, or left his system hooked up just like it was, and we listened to it, and like, especially some Van Morrison just sounded kind of muddy. I mean, it sounded just like a bad mastering of a vinyl, you know, how that kind of sounds, just kind of flat. And he was using a little shit Manny phono preamp. And the first thing we did is swapped in one of my EAR 834 clones, and it was just like, wow, huge difference. I mean, just the detail, the richness, and yeah, I get it that the little Manny's $150 preamp and mine's $850, so it's, some people can say apples and oranges, but you know, if you've got, I don't know what those speakers go for, they're probably $2,000. If you got, you know, nice speakers and, you know, you had a nice Techniques turntable and, you know, GR 1200, I think, and so, you know, had some money in the system, and that transformed it. So we were like, okay, we know that that's where we're headed. We're going to put one of those in the system. So then the next thing we did, and he had a Marantz receiver from the 70s, which is a nice piece, and it was one of the mid-watt ones, which are said to be kind of richer sounding anyway. So we swapped in my EL34, you know, the 12X7 or 5751 driver tube, my new product amp. Swapped one of those in to listen to it, and the top end sounded almost shrill. And I was kind of baffled by what was happening. It's like, why is it sound almost fatiguing, kind of annoying on the top end when that Marantz amp sounded fine? And, you know, thought, well, maybe it's just the amp isn't like really working well with the speakers, or, you know, what's going on. And we kind of tossed around, you know, you could hear definitely more detail, and there was more layering to the sound stage, and it was definitely a lot wider. I mean, the speakers almost just disappeared with a tube amp, but then singer would hit a note, it would just be like, ugh, or a horn had come on, it was just a little too brassy. And so I was thinking, well, maybe with these speakers we need to change the shade feedback resistor to tone the amp down a little bit. Or maybe there's something we can do to the, you know, phono stage. Maybe change one of the coupling caps or something to try to boost the low end a little bit to offset. You know, I was thinking through all this stuff. And then he started talking about the phono cartridge. And it's got a Ortofon bronze. And he was saying that, well, some people say these are kind of bright. So I told him, I said, let me get your phono preamp built so I can bring one out here to deliver to you. And then when I come, I'll bring some different phono cartridges, and I'll bring my soldering iron and some resistors, and try to figure out if we can come up with a solution, because the tube amp did sound more detailed, and it brought some improvements to the table, but it also brought some negative stuff at the same time. So I went out there yesterday and brought some vinyl that I knew what it's supposed to sound like. And when I put the album on his system, we put the tube phono stage in, just like, okay, we know that sounds better, so we're going to use it. And let me listen to and it was Hugo Can Clouds. And that's a really demanding song. And it's got like this harpsichord at the start, and then it's got some really powerful bass that slams in. It's got a really thumpy kick drum that I know what that's supposed to sound like. And then her voice kind of is up front, and it's got a funky kind of a little reverb kind of sound to her voice. I think she's got some kind of, auto-tune or something that she's doing to her voice. But anyway, then there's like a flute that has some really light stuff, and then there's also the harpsichord kind of, it's got little, chords that come here and there that on some systems you can't even hear any of that. And then on other ones it's too much, and so there's trying to figure that out. So anyway, first played it with the Marantz, and to get the balance of the top end and the bass, I had to give it like one click up on the bass tone control. And then he agreed that, in the past he had played with it neutral and with one click, and he couldn't decide which one was like right. And I was like, yeah, one click's right. And he goes, yeah, I kind of listen to that like that most of the time, with one click up on the bass. So that got me to thinking about, okay, this is compensating for something that's not right further up the chain. And I know the phono stage is spot on. So that got me to thinking about the phono cartridge. And so we swapped out some phono cartridges, and God, I can never pronounce this right. The Nakamuchi something. I'll link it up here. The little 110 one. Put that cartridge, I brought it in the head shell and put that in the turntable. Didn't need the click of the bass. So putting the phono cartridge in it then made it sound great at neutral. And so it's like, now we're on to something. So this time we swapped the tube amp in, and it sounded glorious. I mean, it was just perfect. And so we started thinking about it. It was like, it actually sounds like the top end isn't as harsh with the tube amp with this cartridge, but it was too harsh with the other one. And then we started thinking about it. It was like, the tube amp's doing a more accurate amplification of what it's being fed. And with that other phono cartridge, it was too harsh, and it was amplifying the harshness. Now that we've got a more mellow phono cart on the turntable, it's amplifying that. And with these speakers, it's got everything in balance, and now it's got this great sound stage. The speakers just disappear. There's this nice clarity to their voices, and it just sounded great. So I was like, okay, this Marantz amp somehow must have some roll off on the high end, or maybe there's something wrong with the tone control circuit, or the resistors inside have drifted. I mean, if it's an old enough amp where it's got carbon comp resistors, maybe the tone control resistors on the treble have drifted, and it's acting like it's turned down a notch. If we hadn't played with the phono cartridge and got it sorted out, we would have been chasing our tail and would have never got the system to sound right, because we would have started doing weird stuff to the amplifier trying to compensate for a phono cartridge that didn't match the speakers that he's got. And that's why I keep telling people it's a system, and you've got to get it all right. And it's not easy, and there's a lot of trial and error. And in another system, I mean, I'm sure that Ortofon bronze cartridge, I think he said it's a $600 cartridge, and this $150 cartridge sounded better in his system than that $600 cartridge did. I guess the moral of the story is you got to start at the source. And when you have a problem or you're trying to deal with something, tone controls are not the answer. I mean, they can help you figure out like where the problem is, but I don't think they're the solution. And every time I've tried tone controls in a system, when you defeat it, there's an increase in the clarity, and you can hear like this veil being pulled off. And there may be some out there, if you spend enough money, that don't do that. But all the ones I've tried at mere mortal levels of money, I haven't been impressed with. And I wouldn't put in my system. So, anyway, he's super happy. He's never had a stereo that's that musical and just sounds that enjoyable to listen to. Which, at the end of the day, is what this is all about. It's trying to come up with something that you can really enjoy listening to music, and it sounds as good or better than a live performance would. And that's possible if you get everything, all the stars align, I guess you'd say. So, anyway, I guess that's just kind of a follow-up from last week's thing about sources and how important that is. And you have to be willing to try some different stuff until you find something that really works. And I guess he was kind of lucky that somebody like me was willing to come out and bring half a dozen phono cartridges out there and different stuff and play around with things till we found the secret sauce that made his system sing. One thing that I was going to warn you about when I was working on this setup, when I initially powered up these mono blocks, I was feeding them off of my Topping E30 DAC. And I was using the volume control on the DAC to control the volume of the amps, because obviously they have no volume control on them. And I didn't have anything that would work as a volume control. And they sounded great. And I knew, hey, I'm onto something here. These really are great sounding amps. So I knew it was going to be a while before I was going to get this preamp done. And I wanted to listen to my turntable with these. And so I bought this little Shit Audio SYS box. And it looked like a good little solution. It's got a volume control on it. It's got a, 2-position switch for switching between 2 inputs, so I can hook up my CD deck and my turntable, switch between them and control the volume like this. And, at first I was like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. And then the other day, when I finished up a phono preamp and I hooked it up to this and was doing some critical listening, not just listening for enjoyment, but like, okay, here's this album, here's this song, here's what I should hear if the phono preamp's working right. It had this weird reverb kind of a sound to it. And it was almost like it was just smearing notes or dragging them over time. It was hard to describe it. It's like, oh my God, there's something wrong with this preamp. What the hell? What's making it do that? And so, took the mono blocks out, put my 300B amp in, hooked the phono stage up to it, sounded perfect. And I was like, okay, is there something wrong with these mono blocks then? I mean, is there something weird going on with them that I wasn't seeing on the scope or whatever? And then got the color preamp finished, hooked it up, hooked the turntable up to it, the same phono stage, sounded fantastic. So I was like, okay, the only thing that changed was I took this little box out of the system. Well, I went to their website and looked up the specs on this thing, and for whatever reason, the input impedance of this thing is only 10k ohms. And I'm not sure why they have the input or using a 10k pot for volume control. I guess if you're using solid state stuff, none of that matters. But that box does not work with tube gear. So, or you would have to change the output of that phono preamp to work with that low of an input impedance load on the output of the preamp, which, I mean, I'm sure I've read some stuff about using a different output tube for the cathode follower. I think it said to use a 12A-T7 or a 12AU7 or something and change the bias. But yeah, don't put one of these in your tube system. There's no reason to inject that low an impedance into the input side of a tube amp. They normally run 100K pots or 50K at the lowest. And my understanding, most solid state amps usually have a 40 to 50K impedance, never go under 20. So I'm not sure what the thought of is, let's drag it down to 10 with this little box. So unfortunately, I need to take that off my recommended list of using with any of my stuff that just doesn't work. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of do a correction on that, and just been busy trying to build stuff, sell some products, trying to get the amps done, trying to get a video series done on that. I got hung up on some parts, and yeah, just delivery on some of this, even some of these little parts. Seems like it takes 2 or 3 weeks sometimes for some of this stuff to get here, so it just drags on and on when I was hoping it would go quicker. But hey, that's just life. Doing this kind of esoteric product is trying to get all the parts in one place at the same time. So anyway, I hope you're enjoying this content. If you are, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you viewers that have regularly supported me. Got over 12K subs. Really appreciate that. Gonna, when I can get kind of caught up on all this stuff, I'm getting some of these bigger projects kind of out the door. And so I think that we'll be rolling into some new content soon. Might do a revisit on the Rysong A50. Got somebody that dropped one off, and I got some ideas of simplifying that modification on that, and maybe do a little more detailed point by point on the wiring. I know I've had people email me about that. It's like you couldn't really see in the video which pin you were pointing to and all that. So I may do, especially on the front end of one of the tubes, or maybe on both of them, just kind of show where all the wires go for folks that want to do that mod, because that's not a bad sounding little amp when you do the skunky mods to it. Anyway, I'm just rambling now, so we're going to end this video here, and we'll see you next week for the Monday Monologue.